Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to episode 264. This is Melisa Lieberman, and today we're talking about how to plan a quarter that actually grows your consulting business. I was shocked. I went back through all of my episodes I was like, there's no way I haven't recorded anything about this before. And it's true, I haven't. I did one episode on the quarterly focus project, and we'll link it to the show notes. But we've never done an episode on quarterly planning. So let's fill that gap. It's so important. And I want to make sure, especially if you're listening to this in the real time, you have a framework to plan for Q2. If you're listening to this from the future, you can leverage this as a quarterly planning mechanism wherever you're at in the course of the year to get yourself to the place where you've got a much more granular, actionable plan that sets you up for success. So I cannot wait to share this with you, and let's dive in. So before we talk about the agenda for today, I thought it would be fun to give you a quick personal update. Last we left off, I believe, I was telling you that I was headed to Boise, Idaho for a sectional swim meet for my 15-year-old. And we went there. It was so much fun. We spent 5 days. He swam really well, top 20, and broke some team records. And it wasn't his best performance, but he is juggling a lot right now with high school swimming and some snow days and all sorts of things that made prep a little bit challenging, but really stepped up to the challenge. So that was exciting to watch him. The other thing, I feel a little vindicated. Along the way, he had gone to a swim meet to watch his brother. So he wasn't swimming in that particular meet. And this was a few weeks before Boise. And anyway, he came to the swim meet watching his 2 younger brothers and had spent maybe half a day in the stands watching, and asked me, like, how is this so exhausting? I'm so exhausted. And I literally have been doing nothing but sitting here. It made me feel so vindicated because I did 5 weekends in a row of swim meets. Sometimes my husband would come, sometimes the other kids would come, but I was the only one who did all 5 weeks. And I'm exhausted, and made me feel good because he's an athlete, and even half a day of this felt exhausting to him. So that was kind of fun. Now we're headed for spring break up to the mountains for a few days to ski, and really excited about that. I decided not to ski anymore. I've hung up my skis. Like, they're so crowded at spring break, and I'm just nervous around the other people, and I don't feel as in control anymore. I don't love it. So I'm not skiing. I decided, and I'm not going to feel guilty about it. I'm just going to enjoy my time in the place we rented, brainstorming and reading and working on things I love to work on when I have space to think. So can't wait for that. Okay, that's the update. Let's talk about the agenda for today. First, I'll share with you the companion resource. I made a brand new one for you. I'm so excited for you to have it. So I'll give you the details of that here in a moment. Then we'll talk about why have a quarterly plan. Of course, you're listening to this, so you are at least interested in having a quarterly plan, but let's really dig into why do this. Why invest your time as a business owner in building a quarterly plan? What benefits does it have for you? Then we'll talk about the 6 mistakes to avoid that I often see with independent consultants when they're building quarterly plans. And then we'll talk about the steps to build a winning quarterly plan, so you have those. And we'll wrap it up with the 3 steps to put this episode into action. So by the end of this, you'll have a really strong process for building your quarterly plan. Part of that starts with the companion resource I made for you. I made you a quarterly plan framework. So you can go to icquarterlyplan.com. You can download the framework and have the structure we're talking through here today on this call as actionable, right? So that you can put this into action. So you'll hear on today's episode a couple of things. One, the plan that you'll see on this PDF is there. The PDF has more than what we're talking through today. So you'll definitely want to go download that. And also, what we're talking about is the process around designing this quarterly plan, such as the mistakes to avoid. So they go hand in hand. I'm so excited for you to have these resources so that you can put this process in place in your business or optimize it if you've already got one. So again, I see for independent consultant, quarterlyplan.com. We'll put the link in the show notes also so you can grab that and have a great starting point for yourself. Okay, let's talk about why have a quarterly plan. Some of this is very obvious. I was like refreshing. People tell me things that are obvious all the time, and then I'm so grateful because I feel like I forgot or just helps to recenter around these things. So some of these are obvious, and then some might be a way of looking at this that you hadn't had before. So, number one, of course, having a quarterly plan helps you to drive alignment to the big picture, right? Knowing what you are focused on for the quarter and mapping that back to your yearly goals helps you to have a plan that will then fuel the achievement of those yearly goals, of course. So, when you think about what you're doing for the year, I'll give you an example. I just sat down as part of preparing for this episode and did my own quarterly planning process. And I realized I dropped the ball on my relationship with one of my yearly goals. Some of them are on track, some of them are ahead of schedule, some are a little behind, but it's okay. But there was one of them that I completely dropped the ball on. I totally forgot about it. And yeah, so it was taking 10,000 steps a day. So it's not exactly a business goal, but I do find when I'm getting that kind of activity that my brain is in better condition. And so it does impact my business. So that's why it's on the business goals. Anyway, I actually forgot about that entirely. And now it's already the end of March. So I bring this up to you to say that this is such an important process to not only remind yourself of your yearly goals at least once a quarter. It should be much more frequent than that. It would be bad to get in the position that I'm in right now where you completely forgot about it, but it happens. Not a problem. You can correct that, of course, by having this quarterly planning process so that you remember what the goals are. You are looking at them more intentionally, right? So, number one, this gives you that ability to drive alignment to the big picture and also helps you facilitate focus, right? Helps you to say, what am I doing and what am I not doing? It gives you a filter. So, when you've got this quarterly plan in place, not only does it drill down your yearly goals into a smaller segment, it also gives you a filter so that you know what you're signing up for in this quarter. And then also when new things come in, for you to consider. Maybe you get a great idea. You look at your quarterly plan and say, does it fit or should I defer for the next quarter? Or I want to do this thing, so I'm going to replace something that's on the quarterly plan and move that other thing off for a quarter. So it gives you that ability to not only map back to your quarterly goals and have that more discrete plan against them or focus against them, but also gives you that filter. So that's driving the alignment to the big picture for you. The other thing that it's doing is helping you build momentum, right? Through shorter cycles. Of course, a year, and it's so common to build a yearly plan. We did it in corporate, right? Having all these objectives. But at the end of the day, that it becomes so abstract in a way. And we feel a lot of, especially up through the first three quarters, sometimes we feel like we have a lot of time and then we kind of get into a crunch. When you're building your business and growing your business one quarter at a time, it gives you that forcing function to put something in place and get the results and make adjustments. So it's much more iterative and you can build that momentum through those shorter cycles. And the other benefit I want to point out to you that you might not have considered for why a quarterly plan is so vital for your business and the way you're running it is that it strengthens your business owner mindset. When you're going about your day and your week and your month and your quarter and even your year, operating from project to project, operating off of your task list, it's such an operator mindset, right? Such an operator approach. You're the person in the weeds, in the business. When you add this layer of quarterly planning, you're taking a step back at least once a quarter to look at your targets, to set your targets, to figure out what your constraints and obstacles are and make a plan to overcome them, and to build an intentional growth operating process for yourself. This is you thinking of yourself as a business owner. This is you prioritizing because you find that this quarterly plan is important. And this is you executing on it, protecting that time to do the quarterly plan, not just brushing this off and kind of checking the box because you only left yourself 15 minutes to do it and you wanted to get it done. This is about truly taking a step back, thinking of your business as a business and yourself as a business owner, and therefore taking the actions that a business owner would be taking and reinforcing that for yourself. The quarterly plan turns the desire to grow into an exact, this is what I'm doing as a business owner. This is what needs to happen in the next 90 days to make the growth real. That's the difference. So that's why this is so important to have, not only for the tangible outcome of the plan, but also to reinforce the fact that this is a business. This is how we operate the business, and that you're a business owner. And therefore, this is the way you think about operating the business and approach it. So now that we've refreshed why a quarterly plan is important, let's talk about the mistakes that you want to avoid as you're planning. And then, of course, we'll get to the steps of planning. But the mistakes that you want to be avoiding are first and foremost not having a plan, of course, right? So many consultants, when I talk to them, and I've told you this before, I'll warn them when we get on the call, I'm going to ask you these types of questions. One of them is, what is your revenue goal? And then they get on the call, they tell me they know I'm going to ask the question and they still don't have an answer. And I'm not saying this to disparage anyone, of course. I'm saying this because it's a real thing that we have this goal avoidance so often because we're independent, we're solo, and we conflate ourselves with our business, and we don't want to set a goal that we feel or we're worried we're not going to hit, right? So, number one, the mistake you want to avoid is not having a real goal or plan, or both, broken down into quarterly basis. Not having a real goal or plan on a quarterly basis. Number two, sandbagging your goals to avoid disappointment. So let's say you get beyond the concern of setting goals that you're not going to hit and you set them. You don't want to sandbag those. I've said this to you before. Setting a goal for, let's say, $1 million, just to keep the math easy, when you hit 70% of that goal, that's $700,000, compared to setting a goal of 350 that feels super reasonable and doable. That's half of what you could be accomplishing. So look at your sandbagging. And we do this in a very logical way, reasonable. I should set a reasonable goal. I should set a goal that's logical that I could hit. We say all of these things to ourselves, right? Look at where you're sandbagging, where you're setting a goal that's less than what you could accomplish. And that is not even aspirational, right? It's even less than you could accomplish because it's a slam dunk, versus let's set an aspirational goal here. I was working with a client the other day, and she's probably been averaging 15K months. So 45K quarters or so, maybe 30 to 45K, up and down. And we just decided we're going to go for 60. It's going to be 60. And so this gives her 4 chances this year. Now that three, now that Q1 is over, but gives her 3 more chances this year to hit 60K. So thinking about it this way can be so motivating versus, well, I better sandbag in order to avoid disappointment. Relook at your goals and ask yourself, where am I undercutting my abilities? Where am I setting this number because I want to avoid disappointment? Or where am I not setting a goal such as I want to make this much money and work 30 hours a week? Where am I avoiding that kind of goal setting because I don't think it's possible? And revisit what you're doing. Okay, now let's talk about the third one, which is creating a plan, but not committing to it, right? I have a plan. I have a quarterly plan for my 10,000 steps a day. I literally didn't even look at it. I didn't look at the goal, and I didn't look at the plan. And I certainly didn't put the plan on my calendar or even think about it another time since I did this in December, January when I did it originally, right? So don't do what I did. The reason is not because I had a bad plan. The reason is because I didn't commit to it. I did not commit. Let's just be honest with ourselves here. I wrote it down. It seemed like a good idea. I literally never really truly said, this is what I'm doing. I'm making it happen. Even if I have to do these 10,000 steps at 11 p.m. Occasionally because things got out, kind of went off the rails. I did not commit. For you, what goal have you set that you haven't committed to? What plan have you developed that you haven't committed to? It's productive procrastination, right? I love planning. You probably love planning, like sitting down and making this beautiful plan, but then you don't commit to it. You put it in a notebook and you can't even find the plan, by week 3. So that's part of what we'll talk about here in a minute is making sure that that's part of your planning process is the actual commitment. Listen, you're going to make mistakes. This is a process I do all the time. And I missed the bar on this one. I missed the boat, but that doesn't mean that I'm just incapable of goal setting and planning. It means that I missed a really important step with that particular goal and plan. And the good news is it's March right now and I still have plenty of time to adjust. And for you, that's the same thing. That's why we want to do this more frequently. The fourth mistake that you want to avoid is overlooking the importance of mindset in your quarterly plan, unless you want to continue repeating past results. Most quarterly plans that I find, and believe me, I have shelves of planners over on my bookcase because I love planners. It was part of my process of even building my quarterly business planner, is looking at all the competition. Mindset is something that we are not taught is part of the impactful quarterly plan. So I'll share with you what that looks like here in a minute. So you can incorporate mindset into the quarterly plan. And it's also in that download I made for you. Okay. Fifth mistake you want to avoid is focusing on problems without equalizing with wins. We love problem solving as consultants. It's what we do as a profession. I know for me, I love finding problems to solve. I find problems that don't need to be solved sometimes to solve them. The point here is that as a result of that way of thinking as consultants, oftentimes, if not most of the time, it's so easy to skip over what's working because it's not as fun to think about what's working. A lot of us, when we look at what's working, we question, oh, is that really working? Does that count? Is that good enough? It could be more. And then we just basically talk ourselves out of this wasn't even a win. And then we go on to work on the problems. And it becomes a process that doesn't feel as impactful as it could. It feels like a really crappy process, right? Because we can't even agree that we made these wins and then we have to work on the problems and then it all feels really bad. And of course, we wouldn't want to do it. So when we talk about the planning process, I will address this because we want to equalize with what is working. So we're not eroding our confidence or draining our emotional capacity or feeling behind. When we feel behind, we end up making things go so much slower. So that's the fifth mistake to avoid. And then the sixth one is not cultivating a relationship with your quarterly goals and your yearly goals ongoing, right? I just told you I made this mistake. I made 2 of these 6 mistakes. I did not commit to the goal of 10,000 steps. And then I did not make a relationship with it, right? Because I forgot about it. So clearly I didn't have a relationship with it. So when you think about your goals, we talk about cultivating relationship, this is revisiting it. This is looking at it. This is thinking about it. This is seeing that it's possible to accomplish, even if it feels a ways off. It's you building that relationship. And I have a whole episode about the 10 relationships that you want to cultivate in your business. This is one of them. And so we'll put that link in the show notes as well. I wanted to start with these mistakes so that then as we talk about what the plan looks like and as you work through that PDF that I made for you, you can do this in a much more optimized, effective way. So now with that stage being set, let's talk about the steps for a winning quarterly planning process. And again, you can find these steps that I'm about to walk you through with more detail in the download that I made for you that goes with this episode. It is at icquarterlyplan.com. icquarterlyplan.com. That's right. We'll put the link in the show notes. So there are 3 steps here. The first is prepping. This is you just, if we think about it and take a step back, we want to have time blocked on the calendar. Ask yourself, how long is my quarterly planning process as a business owner? Your answer might be 2 hours. Your answer might be 4 hours. Your answer might be one day. What is your answer to this is the amount of time that I'm going to set aside for my quarterly planning process? So that's number one, getting it in your calendar so that you have that space set aside. You know exactly what you're doing and when you're doing it and why you're doing it. It's in your calendar. Then to prep for that session, you want to pull a few things for yourself. The first is your 3-year vision. Do you have a 3-year vision? If not, I pulled out a page from my paper planner and there's a vision setting tool in that PDF for you that you can download. So, to prep for this quarterly planning process, you pull your 3-year vision, your yearly goals, your numbers to date. So, it might be what is your revenue goal? What is your accounts receivable number? What does your pipeline look like? Like numbers like that. And then you've got yourself ready to go. From there, you want to execute your planning process. And this is what it looks like. You want to start off with setting your intentions for the planning session itself. What do you want to get out of this? What questions do you want to tackle? What open decisions haven't been made that you want to make? What is it that you want to walk away from this planning session with? It's so important to set that up front. Imagine this, you're facilitating this process for your company. You've got the CEO, you've got the CRO, you've got the CMO, you've got the COO, you've got the lead of consulting in this meeting. You would be setting intentions, right? What do each of you want to walk away from this meeting with in capturing that? You'll do the same thing for yourself. You just happen to be wearing all of those hats. So that's the first thing you want to be doing is setting your intentions for this planning session. You want to then get into the CEO headspace. So, thinking of yourself as the person who's responsible for making sure the organization has very clear objectives for the quarter that map back to the yearly goals, that then map up to the 3-year vision. So, you're in that headspace that you are the leader who's responsible for driving everyone to be on the same page. You're uncovering, where there are disagreements within the team that need to be addressed. You're uncovering friction and addressing it. You're uncovering obstacles and addressing it. That's the CEO headspace that you want to be in as you move through this quarterly planning process. I always like to just even write on my piece of paper, what role am I filling when I'm doing this certain activity? Today you're filling the CEO role. And then the next step here, we've gotten into the CEO headspace, we've set the intentions for the planning session. And now we want to do the next step, which is assessing the last quarter and year to date and overall. Those questions in the PDF that you can download that go with the episode, but you want to have a process of assessing what's working, right? That goes back to the mistake number 6, not equalizing areas of opportunities with wins. You want to start off with what's working in this business so that you can build upon what is the positive rather than what's the problem. So, what is working? And then what's not working? And what do you want to shift? Like going through an assessment process. Again, I gave you a more detailed one in the PDF. So, having that clarity around the baseline is so important. Last quarter, year to date, and overall. Then we drill into what are your goals for the quarter? And you want to be thinking about this from 5 angles. It's like back to, do you remember in maybe middle school when you learned the who, what, why, when, how, that way of writing? And that's essentially what we're doing with these goals. What is the goal? When is the goal due by? Who's doing the pieces of the goal? Might all be you, or you might have an assistant or VA or those types of things to help you. Who's doing this goal? Or maybe it tells you, listen, I need to engage a contractor for a certain piece of work internally in your business or for client delivery. You want to think about the who. Don't just assume the who is you because you're the solo, have a solo business. And why are you wanting to accomplish this goal? The why is the important piece, right? That's what you go back to. That's what's going to remind me of my 10,000 steps so that I can get back on track with that. So building out your goals in that way is so imperative. And then drilling down those goals into a plan. So you may have 3 goals for the quarter. What is your plan to accomplish those goals? And it may be a collection of projects that you need to implement to accomplish your goals, as well as recurring routines. Like, what does your lead gen process look like every week in order to roll up to the goal of what your pipeline needs to look like in order to roll up to the revenue goal that you've set for yourself? And also go back through that again and say, okay, does this plan that I just built out, my recurring routines, for example, does it mean that I'm landing the type of work that I want to be landing? Maybe you're landing the volume of work that you want to be landing because you know what you need to be doing on a weekly basis and you've got that in place and it maps back to your quarterly revenue goal and to your annual revenue goal. Maybe all of that aligns, but you look at it again and say, oh, my other goal is to do more advisory type work, not so much execution type work. And so then you want to shift what the recurring routines are and maybe even add a project that says, okay, I need to better dial in my offering for advisory type work so that I'm more clear on what it is, who it benefits, and what my lead gen plan is to get in front of those decision makers. That would be an example of a project that goes alongside the recurring routine. The other thing you want to add into this is now we've got our assessment, we've got our goals, we've got our plan to hit the goals. We also want to put a thought plan in place. How do you want to be thinking about the goals and about the plan, about the likelihood of accomplishing the plan, about the why you want the plan, ultimately to come to fruition? What is the thought plan that goes with your quarterly goals? This is where the mindset also comes into play. It comes into play when you're in the CEO, like purposely getting into the CEO headspace as you're doing this. And it also comes into play with the thought plan, which I gave you the framework for that in the PDF. So you can see beyond the example I gave you. And then you want to capture your follow through mechanisms. Again, it's so easy to create a plan and then set it aside. We want to make this plan implementable. We want to make sure you're operationalizing your plan. And so you want to figure out those follow through mechanisms. Ask yourself what's going to get in the way of executing this plan and what can you do to overcome that proactively? Or at least notice in the moment, oh, right, I knew this was going to be a friction point here. I already have a plan in place to overcome that, as an example. So, those are the components of your quarterly goal and plan building. That's the second step. First, we had the steps for building your winning quarterly plan. We're preparing. Then we have building it out. And then the third piece is executing. And this is going back to the point I made earlier. From an execution perspective, this is you committing. And I give you a tool in the PDF that will help you to implement and not do what I did, which is forgetting about these 10,000 steps, but rather committing to yourself and building that relationship with the goals so that this isn't just I'm going to go do this quarterly planning process. It looks really good. And then you just keep going back to doing what you've been doing. We don't want that to happen. We want you to be able to take advantage of the work that you've done here with the quarterly goals. And it comes with a commitment exercise, a continuous commitment, and also an evaluation, getting yourself to the place where you implement your quarterly plan and are tracking towards your goals, but you're also evaluating. So throughout the quarter, you're iterating and adjusting. So it's not just something you put in place at the beginning of every quarter, but rather it's a living process throughout the quarter. So those are the 3 big buckets of the steps for your winning quarterly plan. Again, you're preparing, then you're establishing your goals, and then number 3, you're executing and building a living quarterly process throughout the course of the quarter. Okay, I've touched on this a little bit already, but I wanted to dive in even more into some principles for you for setting high quality goals so that you've got these to think through as you're deciding what are my goals for the quarter. And quite frankly, you could use this on the yearly goals as well. And that you're setting yourself up for that winning plan, for that high quality plan, for that plan that actually brings the $750,000 to life instead of the 350 or whatever the numbers were we were talking about a minute ago, right? Where you're hitting, I think it was 70% of a million. So $700,000 to life instead of the realistic 350. These are the principles you want to be thinking about as you're setting those goals. So the first one is what I just said, right? Set a goal that feels like it's a reach so that it helps you to break the way that you're thinking, right? The point of it isn't to just try to grind yourself to, 700,000 or a million. The point is to set a goal that breaks the way that you're currently thinking about the way that you're operating. It breaks the way of what you think you're capable of achieving so that you can look at things differently, so that you can approach them differently rather than just circling around what you've been achieving, year over year or quarter over quarter. So that's the first thing is, really setting a goal that is a stretch so that it breaks some of the ways that you've been thinking and the current results you're creating. The second thing I want to offer to you is what I call a compound goal. This is you setting a goal, for example, a financial goal. You're a business owner. Of course, you're going to have a financial goal, but also you want to be thinking about how you want to achieve that. So when you think about a compound goal, it could be something like, I want to hit 500K this year. So I'm going to set a goal for $250,000 for this quarter, and I want to work 30 hours a week. That's an example for you of what a compound goal might sound like in your business. I want to create 500K this year. So it means that I'm going to set a goal of 200,000 for this quarter. Obviously, the math is not matching, right? Set a goal for 200,000 this quarter. So it gives you a little bit more breathing room for Q3 and Q4 as an example. Or maybe it's 150. Set a goal of 150 for this quarter, which then leads to, if you did 4 equal quarters, it would be 600K, gives you some breathing room. So what is the compound to that? It might be, I want to generate 200K this quarter and work 30 hours per week so that you're not doing everything you possibly can to hit the number, and then it's not a sustainable business for you moving forward. We're not setting up a goal here for you to do one and done, right? We're setting up a goal for you to grow your business with a strong foundation. Okay, then you want to think about iterative goals. So I touched on this a moment ago with that example from the client where we have these quarterly goals that felt so much more inspiring than just the big annual goal. And that's looking at this as an iterative process, right? You get 4 tries a year to hit your quarterly goals. You get 12 attempts to hit monthly goals. So looking at it in that way helps you to see that this is iterative. And let's say that you set the goal of a 60K quarter, like I gave you that example a minute ago, and you hit 58 this quarter. Now you get another try to say, okay, what do I need to adjust? I was so close last time. What do I need to adjust to just make this my new norm? Or maybe you implement this quarterly goal of 60K or 100K, just pick a number, it doesn't matter. And you only got halfway there. So you hit 30K instead of 60K. Then you start the next quarter and ask yourself, okay, I got halfway there. What am I going to do this quarter to get the other half of the way and make this my new norm? It gives you this ability to iterate. That's so motivating. I also want to reflect back to you that the process I just gave to you a minute ago, I like to call that the 360 type process because it looks like this. The plan that you've put in place has specific outcomes. It has projects or initiatives that you have identified that you want to tackle in order to bring those outcomes to life. It has your recurring execution. So you know, oh, these are the things I do every single week, every single month, every other week. This is how I run my business. And you've got that recurring execution captured. And then it's also got that thought plan in place that are aligned to the outcomes, such as it's possible for me to hit 60K per quarter. That would be an example of a thought plan. As a business owner, it's possible that I'll hit the 60K. If you think 60K is really far out of reach, like this client I was just describing to you did, then not having a thought plan is a huge gap in your overall plan because you're just putting down something on paper that doesn't feel realistic. You need to start working on your headspace to say, you know what? maybe I don't feel it's realistic, but I think it's possible right now. And so you start building up this thought process of, you know what, it's possible that I can hit 60K this quarter. What do I need to do to make that happen? Versus a thought process that most of us would have, which is, oh, this isn't that realistic, but Melissa told me to put a stretch goal down. So I did, and I'll just see what happens. That's not an aligned mindset. What is an aligned mindset and a thought plan example would be something like, it's possible I can create 60K quarters repeatedly and it's my new norm. That's a thought plan that helps fuel you achieving the overall outcome, as an example. So that's the why it's 360 is you've got the outcomes, you've got the initiatives, you've got the recurring execution, and you've got the mindset piece of all of this all coming together. And again, this is in your download PDF, but I wanted to highlight this for you again because it's so important to have all of those pieces in place. And then finally, ask yourself, what are the questions that I need to answer in order to set these high quality goals? Questions like, what does your pipeline need to support this quarter goals? Like, what value do you need in your pipeline to support this quarter's goals? What value do you need in your pipeline to set so that you've set yourself up to hit next quarter's goals? Ask yourself, how does a CRO, a chief revenue officer who hits this number every quarter think? Like figuring out what are your high quality questions. And I give you some examples in that PDF in addition to these. Asking yourself those types of questions will help you then to set your goals up in a way that are more meaningful on a quarterly basis. And that will help you to advance the achievement of those goals as well with the plans that you're making. So now that we've talked about why make a quarterly plan, what mistakes to avoid, the 3 steps of your quarterly plan, and more principles around high quality goals, let's pull all of today's episode together with the next steps, immediate next steps for you to put this into action. Right now, if you can, if you're not driving, schedule time on your calendar to execute your quarterly planning process. Again, it could be 2 hours, it could be a day, whatever amount of time you want to allocate, go put that in your calendar right now and commit to it. Don't say, oh, I hope some client work doesn't overtake this. Instead, it's no, I'm committing to doing this on the block that I scheduled it at, as if you're meeting with someone else. And then go download the quarterly planning process for yourself, that framework that takes what we've just been talking about here to a deeper level. You can get that at icquarterlyplan.com and then go execute it. I would love to hear how your plan goes. If you want to email me, would love to hear what's working about your quarterly plan or what's not. And we can keep refining this as well for you and your business and the way that you apply it to your own internal processes. Okay, my friends. This is the quarterly planning process for you. I'm excited for you to go execute it, and I will see you again next week. Take care.
Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.